Texas is victorious after the state's attorney general took the Biden administration to court over an executive order freezing deportations. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton, an appointee of former President Trump, is issuing a temporary restraining order blocking Biden's 100-day deportation freeze for 14 days across the country. This after Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the Biden administration over the policy. Paxton hailed the victory on Twitter, saying, "Within 6 days of Biden's inauguration, Texas has halted his illegal deportation freeze." He also called Biden's executive order a seditious left-wing insurrection. Paxton said last week that the DHS failed to consult with Texas before making its immigration policy changes, as is required per an agreement between Texas and the agency. The Biden administration has proposed a number of changes to immigration policy, including a plan to give citizenship to around 11 million undocumented immigrants. Last week, Biden also signed an executive order halting all U.S.-Mexico border wall construction. Texas Representative Henry Cuellar says the construction will stop Tuesday night. During Trump's term in office, Democrats and immigration activists often filed lawsuits attempting to obstruct his immigration policies. With Paxton's lawsuit leading the way, it's likely that Republicans may do the same, especially with hundreds of judges appointed by the former president. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And newly elected Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tells NTD why her first major action in office is to file articles of impeachment against President Biden. Greene's articles accuse Biden of abusive power when he served as vice president. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
One example she gives is the 2016 Ukraine Burisma incident, when Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in foreign aid if Ukraine leaders did not dismiss an anti-corruption prosecutor who was looking into Burisma, which was an energy company where Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was on the board of directors.
No matter what political party they belong to, we cannot have someone in that type of position of power where they're willing to do special favors and deals just to help enrich their family's business dealings.
A September report by the Senate Homeland Security and Finance Committees found that Hunter Biden made millions worth of questionable transactions with Chinese nationals connected to the Chinese communist regime and military.
And so this is why I ran for Congress. I'm not interested in playing the same old Republican playbook. Not working. We're not holding Democrats accountable. So what I'm bringing to the table is I'm tired of campaign promises, and I want Republicans to take the gloves off.
And the representative claims that it's not just Hunter Biden who's responsible for these alleged corrupt business dealings. She's accusing President Biden and the First Lady of being directly involved with the corruption. That's based on statements made by Hunter Biden's former business partner, Tony Bobulinski. He suggested Joe Biden was involved in some of the deals. Joe Biden has repeatedly denied that he was ever involved with his family's business dealings. Some wonder what Representative Greene hopes to get out of her attempt to impeach Biden, since if successful, it would lead to Vice President Kamala Harris taking office.
Kamala Harris is guilty of exactly what they impeached President Trump for, and I intend to hold her accountable for her actions as well.
She pointed to the vice president's promotion of the Minnesota Freedom Fund. The money from that fund was reportedly used to bail out protesters who were arrested for violent offenses during Black Lives Matter protests over the summer. Representative Greene's name stands alone on the articles of impeachment for now. But she says she's not discouraged by that. She says she's trying to encourage other representatives to be more bold and show the American people and the Democratic Party that Republicans do have a backbone. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Senator Ted Cruz is trying to put term limits on lawmakers to hold career politicians accountable. Here are the details.
Senator Ted Cruz and other Republicans have reintroduced an amendment to the Constitution to limit the number of terms lawmakers can legally serve. It would limit senators to 2 6-year terms and representatives to 2 3-year terms. Cruz said, "The rise of political careerism in today's Congress is a sharp departure from what the founders intended for our federal governing bodies. I have long called for this solution for the brokenness of Washington, D.C., and I will continue fighting to hold career politicians accountable." He hopes it could give more oversight and accountability to people on Capitol Hill. He said, "Every year, Congress spends billions of dollars on giveaways for the well-connected. Washington insiders get taxpayer money and members of Congress get reelected, all while the system fails the American people. Other Republicans who have joined Cruz include Senators Mike Braun, Pat Toomey, Marco Rubio, Todd Young, and Rick Scott. It's the third time Cruz has introduced an amendment to impose term limits. One opponent argued in 2019 that term limits would make it harder for Congress to do its job. And without an election to worry about, lawmakers could be less concerned with the needs of their constituents. Cruz is asking colleagues to submit the amendment to the states for speedy ratification.
Up to $30 billion of unemployment benefits could have been exploited in California since last March, with $11 billion already confirmed. The figures come from the agency in charge of giving out the funds. NTD's David Lamb reports.
On Monday, January 25th, the California Employment Development Department, EDD, said that up to $30 billion of its unemployment claims could be fraudulent.
Of the $114 billion in unemployment benefits paid by California since March, approximately 10% has been confirmed as fraudulent. Additional 17% of the paid claims have been identified as potentially fraudulent.
Julie Su, California Labor Secretary, said that the EDD is now working with fraud prevention businesses and law enforcement. Bloomberg reports that President Joe Biden plans to nominate Su to the U.S. Labor Department. EDD estimates that 95% of its fraud comes from crime syndicates taking advantage of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA. It reported that the PUA did not require income or employment verification upfront for its claims.
EDD is doing everything it can to put money in people's hands who need it. That's a very important goal. But in balancing expedited delivery of benefits, there weren't systems in place to properly mete out fraud. And so they got exploited. I am doing this, and I'm not trying to blame anyone or point fingers at anyone. I am trying to say today, we've got to come up with solutions.
The district attorney said his office is prosecuting 10 people for unemployment fraud, including 2 who opened up a store with the purpose of filing false claims. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Twitter has routinely flagged posts for supposedly giving out misinformation, particularly posts about whether there was fraud in the general election. It's now giving that power to certain users. That is, if they qualify. NTD's Dawn Tran talked to some experts about the platform's new feature.
If you're on Twitter, have a verified phone and email, and no history of recent Twitter rules violations, then you're well on your way in joining Birdwatch. It's a new feature on Twitter where users can flag tweets considered to be misleading or false. Twitter said Birdwatch is meant to address the issue of misinformation. But social media professor Andrew Selepak said there's a lot of uncertainty with this new program.
My concern is that what people are going to do is they're going to sit in their echo chamber and they're going to look for things that disagree with what they already believe. So if you're on the political left, you're going to look for comments made by people on the political right and look to kind of moderate their content and suggest corrections and basically flag content. And the same is going to be true for people on the political right who are going to look at content from those on the left.
Senior investigative journalist at the Epoch Times and host of the YouTube channel Crossroads, Joshua Phillip, says he doesn't think Birdwatch will do what it's meant to do, and that Twitter itself is not neutral.
Twitter doesn't really have a, say, bipartisan stance when it comes to allowing news and viewpoints. We saw, for example, even the selective censorship of Trump and other people who support Trump when it comes to, for example, putting warnings on tweets. It does seem to be the case that Twitter is doing this out of very likely political interest, or being fair to them, maybe they're doing it as well because they don't have the ability to moderate content to the degree that they feel they would have to, and so they're recruiting people to basically do it themselves.
During the 2020 election, Twitter reported that it flagged 300,000 tweets, most of them relating to alleged voter fraud. At the same time, the platform said the Chinese Communist regime's posts that denied there's forced labor in Xinjiang province did not violate its rules. Selepak says there are a lot of questions about who will be part of Birdwatch.
The issue is that who are these people that are going to be chosen? Who is going to be allowed to do it? And then what are their backgrounds? Twitter said that they're going to allow different users with different backgrounds, but will we ever see a list of who these people are? Will we ever know how many people there are? There's a lot of questions that still go into what this is going to be and what the final version of it's going to be.
Phillips says the program will have individuals determining what is true on Twitter.
And for a person to take up something like that, you need to be a person who already has very strong emotions about, for example, stopping what you perceive as misinformation. And unfortunately, the perception of misinformation these days isn't always misinformation itself. It can just be something you disagree with. And so the question is going to be, what constitutes truth and what constitutes allowed truth?
Phillips says Twitter's new feature is not so different from actions made by communist regimes in the past. He pointed to communist China in the 20th century, where children reported on their parents, leading to their executions and the children being cast away by the Chinese Communist Party.
The effect of programs like this is people start losing trust in each other, and people start looking out at each other as basically thought police. This is the reality that Twitter is creating. It's recruiting people to become volunteer thought police. And we've seen this happen under many communist regimes in the past, and we've seen the kind of tensions it creates between people. It is a terrible development in our society.
Twitter has, in recent months, expanded a number of its policies to monitor misleading information. The platform also suspended more than 70,000 accounts that were engaged in sharing what they termed harmful QAnon-associated content, which they said were dedicated to the propagation of this conspiracy theory across the platform. Reporting by Don Tran, NTD News.
Is the future written in the stars? French doctor and writer Nostradamus thought so. Some say he predicted major historical events, including both world wars and 9/11. Our France correspondent David Vives went to the author's hometown to find out more about the mysteries surrounding him.
The life story of French author Nostradamus is out of the ordinary. It all starts in Salon de Provence, where he was born. It was the Renaissance era, and religious faith was a natural part of scientific inquiry. The young Nostradamus studied medicine.
The first book he wrote was on some drugs. It was based on makeup and marmalades.
News of his drug's efficiency spread rapidly. One episode sent his life down a new path. Plagues came to the region in 1546. More than 5,800 people died. Nostradamus wrote about how much it struck him to see dead bodies piling up in the cemetery. But he dared to face plague-stricken people and became the region's top doctor. Contemporaries said Nostradamus successfully helped to quell the epidemic using a powder made of roses picked in the early morning. In his quest to find the origin of human suffering, Nostradamus came across some unexpected answers. Like many of his peers, he used to spend time gazing at the sky.
The study of medicine based itself on the stars. It's important to know that at the time, we thought that a human body is a universe unto itself, and that it is connected to the stars in the universe as we know it. So the stars in the composition of the universe reflects in the action of humans. So as Nostradamus said himself, he just wrote his poem out of divine inspiration.
He wrote his book titled Prophecies in 1546. The book has about 1,000 poems, each one about 4 lines long.
Here, one of the most known prophecies, it's about the death of King Henry II. The king challenged a count to a joust, or spear duel, during a tournament. Despite the advice of the queen, a piece of the spear got through his eyes and he would die from this injury. And hear what Nostradamus wrote 4 years before it happened. The young lion will overcome the older one on the field of combat in a single battle. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1. Then he dies a cruel death.
He also predicted tribulations around the year 2000, such as the coming of new plagues, famine, and a 3rd World War. According to this website, out of 1,024 prophecies, 800 can be clearly identified as already having come to pass. Other experts say the book Prophecies is nothing more than poetry. Nostradamus committed himself to write in a mystical way, using obscure terms. He said he did it on purpose because the secret of heaven should not be told to the general public, as if the reader is invited on a journey where he could choose to believe or not. Though many of the prophecies have a dark tone, Nostradamus said suffering is only a piece of the wheel in the star's overall movement. According to one translator of his work, this was Nostradamus' message to keep hope alive. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.